Yeah.
I believe we have a quorum, so we want to get started with our Energy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice Committee. I have a number of cards that wish to speak, so I'm going to go ahead and run through the agenda. Now, why don't I do this? Why don't I go ahead, and I'm going to start with public comment. We've been joined now by Mr. Koretz. Someone go ahead and start with public comment. Ethan Sensor, are you here? Yes. Ethan, you're speaking on items 8, 9, and 10?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That is.
Hold on for just a second. Let me see if I can call a couple more speakers. Aaron Biston?
Here.
You want to come on up, sir? Sure. Bruce Resnick? Come on up to the table. And Eric Roman? Eric, are you here? Come on up. Ethan, we're going to go ahead and start with you on items 8, 9, and 10.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Ethan Sensor. I'm an organizer with Food and Water Action. First off, I want to offer my congratulations to Council President-elect Nori Martinez, and thank you for your leadership you've shown on issues of climate and environmental justice, and in getting the city to declare support for a citywide Green New Deal. Thank you. Every year, as the feedback loops of climate change get more and more powerful, the decisions we make become less and less effective at mitigating those risks. And every year, the damage and costs of oil and gas infrastructure behind this crisis, the pollution, the blowouts, the asthma, the cancer, are going to continue to fall on the communities in our city that are already the most vulnerable. And so while regulation is important, what we really need to be doing at this point is figuring out how we are going to shut down these sorts of facilities in a way that uplifts the interests of the community. And we are way past due. That conversation needs to be happening now. So in regards to gas storage facilities, we need to be asking ourselves, what regulatory authority does the city have, not just to regulate, but to decommission a gas storage facility like Playa del Rey, for example? And what actions can we as a city be taking to urge the state, Governor Newsom, and the CPUC to decommission those facilities? We need to be asking ourselves what a real transition looks like for workers at these sites, how we can build an energy system that empowers all communities, not just those who can afford to do it on their own. And we need to understand that we will be unable to do these things in a just manner unless we take a hard look in the mirror, because we are going to need to transition fast. And every second we delay in having a real conversation on what a just decommissioning and transition plan looks like, we are sacrificing the communities that are getting hit the hardest. So, Council President, I am looking forward to working with your office and with this entire committee on answering those questions in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you, Ethan. Our next speaker is Aaron. You're speaking on item number 8.
Yes. My name is Aaron Biston, and I reside at 1107 South Doheny Drive from the years 2000 to 2019. In April, I moved to 1719 Holt. And for the 19 years I've been living there, I've been smelling certain odors, but I didn't realize it had anything to do with oil drilling that was about 500 feet from my house. I knew there was an oil rig, but I didn't know those odors could hurt me. I did some research and I found out within 500 feet, children or elderly are exposed to these contaminants, benzene and other petroleum products, do hurt the environment. I have a granddaughter who goes to school 200 feet away from this oil rig, which is on the corner of Doheny and Pico. And she's 7 years old, and I'm concerned for her well-being. I'm also a real estate builder since 1980 in Los Angeles, and I've built and bought and remodeled hundreds of apartment buildings. There's every 3 years code enforcement comes out and inspects every one of my units. Is there smoke detector working, carbon monoxide that work? Or is there perforation in the screen? Is there a low-flow shower head? Is there tear in the screen and a carpet? And so, of course, I have 30 days to abide. And if I don't, then I go to hearing. If not, it goes to REAP. The point is, of course, I'm not a slumlord. I've always made sure to maintain all my buildings.
Sir, you have to wrap up. Your time is up.
The point is that petroleum oil that is emanating odors in the community in a dense population, that should be a bigger priority.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. If you both can take your seats back in, so I can call two more speakers. Next speaker is Bruce, but give me just a second. Let me call Jennifer Blandon. Are you here? Jennifer?
She's not here yet.
Jennifer's not here. How about Rabbi Johann Buchstein? Want to come on up? What about Richard Parks? Richard, are you here?
He had to leave early.
Richard had to leave. How about Sandra Segura? Sandra, are you here? Come on up. Go ahead, Bruce, and you're speaking on item number 3.
Correct, yes. My name is Bruce Resnick. I'm here on behalf of Los Angeles Waterkeeper and also the Our Water LA Coalition. Not speaking on behalf of, but just for information, I'm also part of the scoring committee in Central Santa Monica Bay WASCA Measure W. I am here to support what is being put forward relating to the first phase of implementation of Measure W. I want to thank, I've worked with a number of council offices, including the chair's office, the mayor's office, LA Sanitation, and other departments on crafting this. I think it's a very important step for a cohesive plan for implementing projects. We appreciate particularly the 5-year plan, as well as prioritization of resiliency, multi-benefit, and equity as part of the measure, recognizing there's still a lot that needs to be done, including the project selection criteria, where we'd like to see an increased focus specifically on nature-based projects, the stakeholder engagement project and how those are going to engage in the process, as well as workforce development in specific projects. And with my last 2 seconds, even though I was here on item 3, I also know Heather Repning and want to throw support for her as well for number 2.
Thank you very much. Eric, you're speaking on general public comment. Is that it?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Good afternoon, council members. First and foremost, congratulations, Councilmember Martinez, on your election as council president this morning. And we applaud you, as my colleague said, on productive and leadership on this committee and specifically prioritizing frontline communities. I, of course, work with Stand LA. We're pleased that motion was introduced this morning at the council to take the next step in an important process of passing a human health and safety buffer around active oil wells in Los Angeles, specifically asking the city attorney to clarify that the city is in good standing to use its powers over land use to phase out oil drilling. And we look forward to working with this committee and also with you, Councilmember Martinez, as the council president, to champion this effort in 2020. And also want to encourage a continuing conversation about working with the city's workforce development department to report back on how the city can address potential employment impacts of phasing out oil drilling over time. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Someone say Jennifer wasn't here, right? Jennifer Bland? She's had to leave? Okay. Rabbi Buchstein, are you here? Oh, you're here. And Richard Parks is also not here?
That's correct.
Okay. And then after Rabbi Sandra Segura. Okay. Yes. Go ahead, sir. You're speaking on item number 8.
How do you do? My name's Rabbi Yonah Buchstein. I run the Pico Shul Education Facility across the street from the Pico drill site. As you know, the drill site has not been inspected. It was supposed to have been reviewed, and unfortunately nothing happened. There have been other attempts, including by this fine committee here, to do things. In fact, in September of 2018, there was a motion passed by the City Council that there should be annual inspections or interim inspections. Unfortunately, those things have never happened. I want to encourage the committee here and to encourage you as the council president-elect, which I'm so happy for, have your woman as the president of our city council. You said back in 2018 that we owe it to these vulnerable communities, and I really want to emphasize that. I want to see, as soon as possible, interim inspections at all these sites so that people like my friend Aaron don't have to worry every day about his grandchildren. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker is Sandra Segura, followed by Wayne Spindler. Hold on for just a second. You're speaking on general public comment. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sandra Segura. I live in 2071 West 27th Street. I live 500 feet from Murphy drill site. I have lived there in the same complex for 33 years. I have 4 kids, all raised in the same address, San Andreas Gardens Apartments. Thank you for your support, the 2,500 feet stand back ordinance. And congratulations on your new appointment. Thank you. I'm so proud of you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Wayne Spindler. You're speaking on all items, including general public comment.
Okay, so good. All the items open, so a shout out to Paul Krikorian. So we get up to this historic day. Number one, we have Ms. Chen is filling the vacancy created by Rachel Malorich. Yeah, Rachel Malorich is a fucking cunt. I mean, you just could not get anything done with this forest advisory under her. Just a bad attitude. You couldn't communicate. She won't return the emails. She will not respond to these FOIA and CPRA requests. Just a disgusting, fat fucking cunt. We're so glad to see her out of here. That's good. So yes, hopefully Ms. Chen will not be the next FC, and that's not for football club. So now we have Heather Repenning. I saw her yesterday. Heather Repenning, number two. Is she here? Heather. Okay. So we saw her yesterday. A longtime friend of Wayne from Encino and the Honorable Armando Herman. So she wants to be in the Metropolitan Water District, and she's filling the vacancy of Glenn Dake. Glenn Dake is the mayor's boyfriend. And he's just a real tall, good-looking guy and got the biggest dick you've ever seen in your life. I mean, it's just amazing. I mean, we're just.
Can you get back to
Mitchell Farrell, no, I mean, he was really impressed,
Mr. Spinner, you need to get
No,
back.
I mean, this is kind of more of the cleaning the house kind of thing going on today. Yes, I mean, Glenn needed to get out of there, even though he's got such a large dick. I mean, it's just amazing. So Heather Repenning will do a far, far better job, and a much better job, of course, but Paul Koretz used to be our water district representative for the city. He did a good job. I went to one meeting, and he got me thrown out before I could speak, and because I had a croissant in my mouth. So, that's, so Heather will do well, lower our water rates. And then, of course, we have the usual bullshit, which is all of this other stuff. Nobody gives a fuck about drilling for oil. We need oil. I drive a car, I have oil, and I have gas. I mean, so you got to have oil, you got to have gas. Everybody here agrees with Donald Trump that we need to drill for more oil so we can lower the prices. Even Nuri agrees. So again, this historic day, Nuri takes over. Goodbye, Herb Wesson, you disgusting, cigarette-smoking, lying, cheating thief of a nigger cocksucker. Bye-bye, and let's start the city on a good note. Thank you.
So, looks like that will conclude all speakers for today's agenda, including general public comments, so I'm going to go ahead and close that. Members, I'd like to move items 1 to 8, 9, and 10 on consent. Are there any objections, Mr. Koretz?
If we could hear number 8.
Okay, you want to hear number 8. Any other items, members? If not, let's go ahead and move items 1, 2, 9, and 10 on consent. Without objection, that will be the order. Mr. Koretz, why don't we go ahead and hear item number 8? Would you like staff to come up?
Yes, please.
Okay. Is there anyone here to speak on item number 8?
Madam Chair, would you like me to read the item into the record?
Yes, I'm sorry about that. Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and read item number 8 into the record, and we can just go ahead and, please come on up. Let him read the item into the record, and you can introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Certainly. Item number 8 relates to motion, Koretz, Harris, Stoss, and Wesson relative to instructing the Petroleum Administrator to work with the Department of City Planning, Department of Building and Safety to report on an effective transition plan for ongoing enforcement of existing oil and gas agreements.
Good afternoon. Want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Erica Blyther. I'm the Interim Petroleum Administrator for the City of Los Angeles.
Well, welcome.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much, and welcome. Mr. Koretz, you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, given that Uduak has left us, you may not have all the answers, but I do want to ask you about something that he mentioned to us regarding the annual inspections motion. He said that he was having his staff currently do desk inspections because there wasn't enough funding to do in-field inspections. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we have completed desk audits, or desk inspections as we're calling them, for the 17 drill sites. So this is the example for West Pico. So we've gone through and we looked at permits for the Fire Department, South Coast Air Quality Management District, Division of Oil, Gas, Geothermal Resources, as well as planning, Watershed Resources, stormwater protection. And we've gathered all the files related to violations, equipment, et cetera, for each of the drill sites.
And how did we miss the settlement that we've since found out about?
So we did not have the settlement agreement from planning. We got some files, but we didn't have that one. We've since received that and updated our records.
So I think that indicates part of the problem that we have is a lack of communication between departments, and hopefully when we do this motion, we can improve communication and make sure they don't miss any of the work that's been done before. Can you tell us where the annual inspections ordinance is in the process? I do want to say clearly this is not a substitute for getting rid of incompatible land uses, but at least in the meantime, we want to be sure that these take place and we can improve the health of our constituents while we still have these sites open.
Yes, so the annual inspections, our Board of Public Works actually approved the contract back in May of 2019. It took some delays, but we eventually had the contract approved through our city process, and the contract was signed by the Board of Public Works on November 13th, signed by the city attorney on the same day, signed by our contractor in place on November 18th, and it was given a contract number and signed by the city clerk on November 21st. So we had a kickoff meeting on November 21st, and the work plan's underway. We've already reached out to various city departments and agencies, South Coast Air Quality Management District, as well as Division of Oil, Gas, Geothermal Resources, regarding working with them, coordinating efforts, and we have a projected time frame about 3 to 6 months.
So is that when the actual on-site inspections begin, 3 to 6 months, or when they're completed?
That's when we've completed this process, which is analyzing the feasibility. Currently, the Office of Petroleum and Natural Gas does not have the authority to conduct inspections, so we're looking at those with regulatory inspection authority and looking at their processes, permit assessment, their fee structure, and seeing what we can replicate. So that'll be the completion of our study.
So once the study's done, then presumably you would come back to council with something that would allow you to conduct those inspections.
Yeah, a process to go towards that, yes.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Any other further questions on this item, members? Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and move to approve this item. Without objection, that will be the order. Thank you very much for being here. Let's go ahead and take up item number 3, which is Measure W governance. You want to go ahead and read that into the record?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Item number 3, CAO CLA report relative to governance structure for Measure W, the Safe Clean Water Program.
So, colleagues, a few months ago, we had asked the CLA and the CEO's office to report back on the governance model for Measure W. So today's report actually outlines those recommendations for that. So I'd like to hear more from staff about the background in the report and what you're recommending us to move forward with today. I also would like for you to walk us through and explain how equity, environmental justice, and prioritizing some of these burning communities that I often talk about will be taken into account.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. Yes, your committee and council instructed us to report back on a governance structure for Measure W. Since that period of time, we've also followed your instructions to meet with all the key departments that we determined should be involved in this matter. You had outlined them as well as Bureau of Street Services, Bureau of Sanitation, DWP, Rec and Parks, as well as, am I missing one? I think I got them all.
Bureau of Engineering.
Bureau of Engineering as well. We met with each of these departments extensively and as well looked at prior efforts, particularly Propo and came up with a model which we feel fits the model for this program at this stage. What we've come up with is and essentially the creation of an administrative oversight committee to oversee the program, oversee the projects that are proposed by the key departments, as well as the criteria for those projects. Most of the work we anticipate will be done within the working group, which is composed of each of these departments, and that these departments should be following a comprehensive strategy plan, which we've identified as the WISP in the report. To give you an idea of how the flow of this will work, we've provided a flow chart which each of you have been provided with. It's also attached to the report, and it in essence shows how this will flow. This is very preliminary at this stage. We anticipate that we will add to this, the departments will add to it as the program expands. It is a very preliminary program for the county as well too, as they're working on the matter as well. So in essence, what we're asking for today is your consideration of requesting the city attorney to prepare an administrative oversight committee ordinance, as well as instruction to the departments to create the WISP, which is Strategic Investment Strategy.
Do you have anything else to add?
Soraya Bago with the CAO's office. And just to go into a little bit more detail about the Watershed Investment Strategic Plan, this would be a document that the working group would develop under with sanitation serving as a lead department to coordinate and organize. The plan would have two components, the first being a policy statement that would outline what the county's requirements are as well as what the city's specific objectives would be. The second component being a capital planning document. So this would be a rolling 5-year plan that would provide the specific proposed projects, their capital costs, the operation and maintenance costs, and then identify the department or agency that would be responsible for implementation and for O&M. We would include a stakeholder engagement process as part of this so that we could basically integrate NGOs and CBOs that would like to propose projects. And we would evaluate these projects based on the county's requirements as well as the city's policy objectives for both the municipal and the regional programs. We can walk you through the approval process if you would like to turn to the attachment.
Sure.
The working group that we've described would prepare this draft
You're referring to this document,
attachment
correct?
B of the report. The working group would prepare the draft Watershed Investment Strategic Plan, and I have to apologize, we have some typos in this flow chart. Wherever you see integrated should be investment. So they would prepare this draft plan. It would be submitted to the AOC, which would be representatives of the mayor, the CLA, and the CAO's office, who would provide input, possibly make modifications, identify who would be the implementing department responsible for the O&M. Then the AOC would submit a final plan to the mayor, the council, and at a time that would be appropriate based on the individual departments, they may either need to submit approval to their boards before or after. I think that would be something that would be determined as part of the AOC process. The local component would essentially become the city's municipal program, and sanitation would submit that year of proposed projects as part of their CIEP, their capital improvement expenditure program, for Measure W in time for submission with their proposed budget. The regional component of the strategic plan would have to go through the county's oversight process. I know I've covered a lot of ground there. Do you want to have?
Let me see if members have any questions. I think it's a really good start, but I still think there's more work for us to do, and I will be providing additional instructions to the staff recommendations. But I'd like if any of my colleagues have any questions, I'll start to my left. Go ahead, Mr. O'Farrell.
Thank you so much for this. I was very, very intimately involved in some of the Prop O projects from the time that ballot initiative passed in 2004 through the rededication of the renovated Echo Park Lake in 2013. Watershed management is generally a sanitation, under the wheelhouse of sanitation. But Prop O, I think the lead agency was engineering. And So when we implement these watershed improvements, it will involve engineering because things will be built. And so if you could take us through how this is different from Prop O, and where I'm going is, I think in the final analysis, Prop O was very, very successful. Several of the projects saved money, and we delivered the product on time. And so I come from the perspective of making sure that we can learn from a really great recent example on how improvements were made in the governing structure and making sure that we don't make decisions that might bog us down in terms of these improvements we want to see in relation to the watershed. So if you could start with explaining the differences between the Prop O governing structure and this governing structure.
Certainly, Mr. O'Farrell. So at the root of this program, the roots of it contains Prop O, for the most part, the governance structure of it. Within Prop O, when that program was constructed, we gave roles to the key departments, which were sanitation and engineering. Sanitation was designated as the project planning coordinator, because it was TMDL oriented and so forth. They would design the projects. And engineering was a project implementer. They would be constructing. And they basically maintained those roles. When we looked at that structure and we determined what's the best fit for this, we saw that this is a much bigger program, significantly bigger than the $500 million. In essence, $85 million overall a year in perpetuity, and that we would need to allow more space for other departments to bring in their resources as well too, which is why we devised this working group approach. I think we anticipate that engineering will have a very similar role in this program as well as implementer. It'll simply need to be determined by the working group, what they come up with, what AOC thinks of it, and then ultimately what the council and mayor believe. But we came up with a structure which allows for flexibility, given that the county is still figuring out how it's going to do it, as well as there's two components, the regional piece and then there's the local piece. So I think it allows for that flexibility. But at its root, engineering still maintains an implementation role.
Mm-hmm. I get that it's a different beast and it's larger and a little more complicated. So perhaps baked into this governing structure can be values that where the working group really focuses on efficiency and a sense of urgency to move projects, because that's another element of this. You mentioned $85 million a year. Yeah. So we're going to have to move with efficiency and with a fair amount of, I don't want to say speed, but yeah, we're going to be trucking along every year. So the working group, I think that if those values are baked into the agreed upon processes of the working group, that will help make sure that nothing is bogged down in a new bureaucracy, for example. I have no qualms and no concerns whatsoever about the working relationship between sanitation and Bureau of Engineering. It's stellar. It's terrific. I want to take an opportunity to mention how well the Prop O implementation went in the final analysis. And the fact that, like I mentioned, we literally saved tens of millions of dollars and we're able to reprogram that money into other unexpected projects. And I would love to see a similar focus on this.
Yeah. I think perhaps where those roles could be clearly outlined would be within the WISP, the strategy plan. And if you approve these recommendations, we're leaving it up to those departments to come back with what that looks like, mm-hmm, including their roles. So ultimately what we've done here is we recognize that this is a much bigger program, so we've just expanded the Prop O room. We've made it just much bigger to allow for more departments. We also recognize that we still need to maintain efficiencies in the administration.
And lastly, Madam Chair, so once you've met with the players and they've given their input, will you report back to this committee? Absolutely. On that structure? Absolutely. Terrific. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. Mr. Perez?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few questions. One, the report says that the first Measure W call for projects date is December 15th, I believe.
Yes.
Correct.
So obviously, you won't come to this committee in time to present the project, so I wonder if you could just give us an idea of the type of projects you're looking at in this first go-round.
Well, that's that. The Bureau of Sanitation has that information. I think they could provide it.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Shuram Karagani, LA Sanitation. So as you are aware of that, we have a strategic planning for our 22 TMDLs that we have. Those are called Enhanced Watershed Management Program. We took those plans as the basis of our strategic plan, and then we applied 3 other standards on top of that. One is obviously the date of our compliance for our obligation. The other one was project readiness, shovel readiness, and the last but not least, the amount of information that we had on those projects. Using those standards, we have 5 feasibility reports and studies that we have prepared for first round. And just in brief, it takes about $200,000-300,000 of both city staff working with consultant and to create feasibility that satisfies the county requirement. There are 5 of them right now. There are Lancashire, just by name right now, Lancashire project. And then we have Oro Vista project, we have Banning project, we have Bonner Creek, TMDL project, and last but not least, we have the MacArthur Park. So those are the 5 that we have created to meet the December 15. And we borrowed money through our sister agencies, and that action went to the City Council when you approved us to spend that money to prepare 5 projects feasibility and 15 concept report for municipal program.
And I know we have some projects that, like street reconstruction, that incorporate stormwater capture and street sweeping, which could be increased with purchase of additional equipment. Can the additional costs of those relating to stormwater be funded through Measure W?
So the standards that the county has set for us, and we are audited each year, is, as my colleagues indicated, is water quality, water supply, and then community enhancement. If those things can be, explained in those terms and the rationale, and of course, we are in contact with county almost on a daily basis, so we could also get their input to see the projects that we have put together based on the specifics. Does that satisfy the county criteria and the city criteria?
So we'll at least take a look at those types of things.
Yes.
Do we have any kind of a workforce development plan in terms of the jobs that we would be able to gain by implementing Measure W?
The report before you does ask for us, and we would be happy, LA Sanitation would be happy to look into that. What is a part of your report that we have to develop a workforce program, also development program as well. So we are going to do it, yes.
Okay. And one last question. Obviously, trees are an important component of any healthily functioning watershed. So how can we ensure that trees are included in every Measure W project?
That's another good question, sir. As you know, because these are nature-based and green multi-purpose projects, trees are our BMPs. So the more trees that we are going to have in the project, the more points they receive on the community enhancement and nature-based. So the answer is yes. The trees are the BMPs for stormwater, one of the BMPs for stormwater.
And while we're doing multiple things at the same time that are positive, can we look at improving habitat with new trees by trying to emphasize native trees that obviously interact better with animals and birds and bees, et cetera, et cetera?
Absolutely, sir. And that's a part of also LA Sanitation biodiversity. So trees plays an important role in that plan as well.
And if we look at street sweeping as part of this, can we also look at possibly piloting some electric street sweeping vehicles?
We would be happy to look at that and report back to you based on the details of that specific project program.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Krikourian?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So on the project selection criteria, whether under the county's criteria or in the city-specific criteria that are being proposed. Can you talk a little bit about how recharge of the aquifer is prioritized among these projects?
So obviously, the three standards that both county and the city has is water quality, water supply, and then community benefit. For the water supply angle right now, the projects that are going to be recharging our San Fernando Valley Basin, they are receiving the highest points. So that's how it has been, included within our standards. Obviously, and also for stormwater, anytime our strategies, anytime we could infiltrate, that would be our option priority one. And then priority two would be capture and use if we cannot infiltrate because of the technical, feasibility of the geotechnical soil that it cannot infiltrate. We would use the water, capture the water, and we would reuse it for irrigation demands. And last, our priority would be, treat and release, just to make sure that, the water in our creeks and streams still, exists and they are clean.
Great. And I noticed there's a recommendation to look at historic levels of stormwater watershed management investments and assign a higher priority for areas that have not had such investment, which makes some sense from an equity perspective, although we already have prioritization of disadvantaged communities, which I think is intended to do the same thing. It very well may be the case that from an engineering perspective, the areas that haven't had investments in stormwater watershed management investments are those that don't need it as much, and that historic storm areas or flooding areas are the ones that have had the investment because they flood. So to what extent are you balancing just sort of notions of equity with what will prevent the most flooding impacts?
So obviously, through the working group and having the sister departments that my colleagues indicated, that we would be creating that 5-year plan that would include both technical, historical, and the amount of work that we have done. We have lots of data, as you know. We are monitoring the water quality, and also we are also monitoring sanitation, also take care of the flood protection. So we have all of those historical data that would be updated in our existing plans. And based on those plans, that's where we create the projects to be addressing those plans. And we would be coming before you through the AOC and the City Council as far as approval before we move forward.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Seeing none, I have 3 additional instructions that I'd like to submit for the record. So first of all, I'd like for us to adopt staff recommendations and include the 3 additional instructions. To instruct the CLA, the CAO, and sanitation to report back on the options to wind down the Prop O program and incorporate it into a larger effort. 2, instruct the CLA and the CEO and sanitation to report back on policies for local return to ensure funds stay within the watershed that they were generated from, also taking into account a previous Prop O expenditures. Instruction 3 is to instruct sanitation to immediately inspect and identify the drainage deficiencies in disadvantaged communities and develop an action plan to address these concerns with the regional and local efforts, including opportunities for the flood control districts to invest in these solutions. Are there any objections?
Well, I'm not sure I understood the relationship with the Prop O watershed instruction that you gave, because to a large extent, I think, to the point that I was raising and to the point you very well know, the San Fernando Valley was, I think, not given as much equity under Prop O as it deserved. And
Correct.
So I want to make sure that as we move forward with this, we correct those previous imbalances and don't set them in concrete by retaining the Prop O limitations. So I just didn't quite catch that point.
Well, the whole point is that we're trying to ensure that if there is an overlap between Prop O and how we were doing things in the past, I want to ensure that we become more efficient moving forward, and that we are looking at not only Prop A projects, but also incorporate what the new Measure W brings. And I was looking at possible projects that can overlap.
Yeah.
Monies that
I see.
that we can be using from Pop O and Measure W so that we can be more efficient and perhaps do more projects, additional projects that didn't get fulfilled under Project O. Measure O, I should say. That was my thinking behind the whole, trying to figure out what those efficiencies are and possibly use 2 pots of money.
Terrific. So nothing that we're doing with the project criteria with Measure W would be constrained by what the project criteria were under Measure O then?
No.
Okay.
That
No,
is
I think,
correct.
unfortunately, I think we probably inadvertently raised this issue in our report. We recognize where Propo is at. It's a kind of a tail end. So since they're both very similar in nature, we figured this is a good opportunity to raise the issue that perhaps the committee may want to ask us to figure out a way to effectively wind down Propo, but at the same time come up with an effective strategy for both in Propo's final years and Measure W's incoming years.
How many more years do we have of Pop O?
I believe about 15 years, Madam Chair, 15, 16 years, I believe. Yeah, so it's, and the majority of the funds have been expended or committed. I believe there's about maybe $20 to $30 million still remaining, but some of those projects, some of those funds are already committed. So there is a need for an effective strategy to bring it towards an end in a way, particularly as more staff resources are being directed in this area.
So, Madam Chair, would it be best described as leveraging resources of Propo as it's winding down into the goals of Measure W?
And in fact, the county is emphasizing that as a possible strategy. They want local agencies to leverage as much as possible.
That's one of the strategies they're looking at, correct. Okay, if there are no objections, I'd like to go ahead and move forward with this. Okay, without objections, that will be the order. Let's go ahead and thank you very much for presenting this afternoon. Let's move on to items 4 through 7, if we can take those items together. I'll give you some time to get back to your desk so you can read these items into the record. But our next items are all related to efforts and motions to address our homeless encampments and illegal dumping. So as you're exiting, I'm just going to ask you to please do it as quietly as possible so we can get through the next couple of items that we have pending. Why don't you go ahead and read those items into the record, sir?
Certainly, Madam Chair. Number 4, Bureau of Sanitation to report relative to various instructions related to the comprehensive cleaning and rapid engagement and Care Plus teams, as well as sanitation has submitted a report, which you now have. And number 5, motion Martinez Rodriguez relative to instructing the Bureau of Sanitation report on the formation of a pilot sign program in Council District 6 that promotes the use of the 311 program and related matters. Number 6, motion Rodriguez Huizar relative to instructing ITA and sanitation to report on development of a comprehensive electronic documentation system to log discarded items. And number 7, motion Buscaino Huizar relative to instructing the Bureau of Sanitation and the CAO to report on the cost and feasibility of replacing metal wire trash receptacles with fully enclosed wrap-proof trash bins. I believe that covers the items.
Thank you very much. Like I said, these items are all related to our efforts and motions to address our homeless encampments and our illegal dumping that we continue to hear every single day. Earlier this year, we did approve the new deployment plan under sanitation that includes an authorizing $6.5 million with this new approach. I knew that the transition period would be the entire month of October, which when we kicked off the program was October 1st, so I've been waiting to see how this program, whether it's being effective or not. And as I mentioned to this committee several months ago, I don't really need to see any data or graphs or spreadsheets to tell me whether the program is working or not. All I have to do is get in my car and drive my district, and I can tell you whether my constituents are happy or not with the program. So I haven't seen much improvement over the last month and a half. I actually would say 2 months now, as it was promised in this committee. So I'd like for you to, I'm going to give you an opportunity to talk a little bit about how the crews are responding to some of these problematic locations, whether the new defense approach, zone defense approach, I believe it's what you call it, is working, and whether our crews or our care teams are actually meeting the needs of each council district, and if individual teams are actually fully being empowered to clean up or they're just being handicapped by more bureaucracy. I want us to really get into the details of how the program is working. So I'm going to go ahead and give you an opportunity to present. I know several of us have additional questions, so go ahead.
Thank you very much. Jose Garcia, Assistant General Manager for LA San and the Environment, President-elect Martinez, council members. For this update, I'm going to turn it over to the Division Manager for the Livability Services Department, who can pretty much give you a verbal picture of where we started, our gradual blend towards where we want to achieve the early part of next year. So, Gabriel Miranda.
Great. Thanks. Gabriel Miranda, Division Manager with Livability Services Division with LA Sanitation and Environment. Good afternoon, President-elect Martinez and members of the committee. As you mentioned, October 1st was the launch of our Care and Care Plus program citywide. So we now have 30 teams of Care and Care Plus deployed out of 4 regional deployment yards. The regional deployment strategy, coupled with the newly hired staff of 47 new positions, brings livability services to 257 positions within our division. This encompasses the public receptacle program, the Clean Stat operation, as well as the Care and Care Plus program. As a component of the newly launched Care and Care Plus program, LASA's homeless encampment team members are embedded into each of the Care and Care Plus teams. This is a new shift with this model. The deployment model places LASA homeless engagement teams to conduct extensive outreach and engagement on a citywide basis. Through the Unified Homelessness Response Center, LA San, LAPD, LASA, our coordinated operations on a daily basis. The ability to directly connect and dialogue with senior LASA members on deployment and engagement strategies has provided a tremendous increase in operational intelligence for us with sanitation. So the care teams are comprised of, as I mentioned, LA San, LASA, and LAPD in a supportive role. Every morning, as part of this deployment, we deployed 500 additional receptacles to areas where folks are experiencing homelessness as part of a trash service plan. Our crews service those receptacles every morning from 6 to 8 a.m. During that time, our environmental compliance inspectors are also doing postings for the Care Plus operations. Part of the regional deployment is creating that familiarity with our staff in the areas that they're working in. So that has worked really, really well in this model. Care operations are continuing, as I mentioned, with LASA getting voluntary compliance. Our inspectors are responsible for all health hazards, ingress, egress, ADA compliance, and ensuring that all that is done on a daily basis. The other component is the mobile hygiene units, which we have added as part of this new component for care. We currently have 3 mobile hygiene units deployed citywide. To date, we've had 823 individuals utilize this service on a citywide basis. And this has provided very productive, necessary need of restrooms and bathrooms citywide. And then part of the enhanced services. So leading up to the care launch with the enhanced service model during the months of July, August, and September, we did a lot of proactive illegal dumping work leading up to the care program. And some of the basic metrics, as you mentioned, Madam Chair, is the visual appearance, and that is true to us as well. So the component of illegal dumping citywide and creating a more proactive approach was very important to us. Rather than waiting on a Mile A 311 service request to come in, with that enhanced service, we generated and doubled the tonnage from the previous year, along with over 5,000 proactive service requests that we created as part of the illegal dumping model. And I'm going to turn it over to Domingo Orozco, who's the Assistant Division Manager, to touch on some of the operational efficiencies and some of the challenges that we faced over the past 2 months and how we're improving in those areas.
Thank you. Madam Council President-elect, members of the committee, thank you. And on behalf of the division and all 260 members of Livability Services, thank you for your leadership and guidance on this program as we've gone through, as Gabriel laid out, an early transition that really came from a couple of different programs and has changed into a larger, more of a larger foundation for us to deploy services across the city in a more faster, more easier response. A lot of the questions that have been placed on the bureaucracy of the program, trying to address that, get the teams out to the fields earlier, using regional deployment as an asset for us, and using that as a way to make sure that the CDs across the city have those resources that they need day in and day out. And that's a huge component for us. As Gabriel mentioned, one of the things that we've been having a rocky start with are just getting the teams situated, making sure that they have the training, support, staffing, and equipment necessary. A lot of our team members are new to this program. A lot of the training is still ongoing. We've received quite a bit of support from City Attorney's Office, from LAPD, making sure that we're fully versed on 5611, fully staffed and trained and ready to make sure that health hazards are cleared from the public right away and that service is being provided. Also, we're also making sure that our staff knows how to use the radios and making sure that they have coordination with LAPD. One of the benefits of the program that we've experienced is direct daily coordination with LASA and their homeless encampment team members. Having that component added to our program has made a tremendous effect on our team. It's brought an intelligence and a sophistication that we haven't had. Using LASA as the first door knock at each service location has helped us build trust and understanding with the community that we serve, and we've seen the tremendous effect there. One of the things that we want to make sure is that whenever we're servicing any of these locations, that we're also clearing any illegal dumping, any litter, any debris in that area to build upon the services that our teams are providing, and also ensuring that there's no health hazard left. LASA being the first door knock really is a great opportunity for us to achieve voluntary compliance on that part. The next part is making sure that we don't leave a health hazard there and that area is safe for all that use that space, whether they're experiencing homelessness or they're on their way to a school or a library or just walking through their neighborhood. And so we've learned how to make sure that we have that support that's necessary. LAPD has been very supportive in helping us gain an operational intelligence and using their radios and proper channels and proper language to speak as far as calling for assistance. And actually tomorrow we're having more training with City Attorney's Office. LAPD has also stepped that up. One of the things that we're really working with is making sure that the staffing has been provided. So through the authority of this committee, we filled off 47 positions through the last action. So we thank you for that. Right now we're in the process of onboarding 13 maintenance laborers, and those teams, those staff members through targeted local hire will be used to staff our mobile hygiene units and making sure that those units are ready for deployment across the city. We're also very excited that the Assistant Environmental Compliance Inspector classification is coming to PAWS Committee tomorrow for salary setting. And having that classification in our toolbox is going to be tremendously beneficial to the department. It's a feeder classification. We will use the maintenance laborers within the Livability Services Division, and they will have the opportunity to transfer into this position. And they will take some science courses or use science courses that they've had. And as kind of a bridge, they'll be able to then apply for a full environmental compliance inspector classification, or they'll be able to continue on into their classification and possibly transfer into a refuse collection truck operator. So this gives them a new tranche of career development. We're really excited about that. Another component that I wanted to quickly touch upon was the coordination that we're receiving with the CAO's office as far as the Bridge Home program is concerned. We're working with that office to ensure that using our CleanStat 2.0 data, that we're sizing and situating the ABH zones for special enforcement cleanup zones across all of those locations as they're coming up. We're also using a multitude of divisions within LA Sanitation to support that program, whether it's constructing, printing, and placing signage, or it's providing 4-day comprehensive cleanups with the CARE program and once a week CARE Plus program cleanups in those zones. We're making sure that a lot of this is moving forward. At this point, I will turn it back to Gabe to touch on different components.
Sure. Any questions to this point before we move on to some of the other items?
Yeah, before I open it up to my colleagues, so I understand all that. But the frustration that I feel is that instead of things, my district is not getting cleaner. In fact, I think it's actually getting worse. How can we have deployed this new program, been basically made to think that things were going to improve, but when you drive my district, I actually think it's gotten worse than it was several months ago. So something isn't working. I certainly appreciate the loss of folks coming, into our crews and developing that personal relationship with our unsheltered folks, but we cannot leave it up to them to decide what's, to LASA staff in some instances, to decide whether something is trash or isn't. And I now have my staff going to every single care cleanup in my district, every single one of them, to take pictures of what, before and after pictures, and the before and after pictures are not very different. We're not cleaning, is what I'm trying to say. The other frustrating part is the care teams were reassigned during the high fire areas, to high fire areas during the high winds. And I understand that that needed to be done for public safety reasons. But how is that fair for areas that weren't impacted by that? Especially when we were you never shared with us that information during the deployment plan. So as a result, communities like Sun Valley and Arleta were basically shortchanged. We did not get one single cleanup for the 2 weeks that we were experiencing the fires. So it's things like that that makes it incredibly frustrating, and it's just not acceptable. If we're going to roll out a program, we need to see it go into effect. We need to ensure that things are improving, not getting worse. And that's why I asked you the question whether our care teams were actually meeting the unique needs of each council district. Are individual teams truly being empowered to clean up, or are we simply handcuffing them? And that's something that you should be able to answer, yes or no. Are we making things better for our cleaning crews, or are we making it more difficult for them to do their jobs?
So if I could address that. The ideal model here, I mean, every council district is unique, and their needs are driven by...
Mr. Herman just entered the room. Let it be noted that he started, interrupting this meeting. This is your first and final warning. There is no more public comment, sir. It's been closed. Thank you very much. Sorry for that interruption.
Okay. So kind of to touch on, it kind of touches on number 6 in the items that we need to address. So the fact that every council office has a care component to it, basically at your leisure. So the ideal, or where we want to move to, is that you get a Care Plus operation in your particular district, and you may clean up 2 or 3 sites, maybe every Monday or every, throughout the month. The idea is that component of the care team, not only what Gabriel described as going by and picking up the trash at those particular locations that are dense, but also to go back into all of the other comprehensive cleanings that we've done, and actually go back the day after, 2 days after, and 3 days after, to actually maintain some type of serenity within that, so they don't acquire a bulky item, so they don't start to build structures and attach structures to fencing and those type of items. So where the electronic version of a care team can see where we've been yesterday, last week, 2 weeks prior, and then kind of circulate through the district where we've already done comprehensive cleanings and give a report back as far as the status and the hazardous waste condition or hazardous assessment conditions of that particular cleanup that was done probably 2 weeks ago. So in a nutshell, basically, if we do a major comprehensive, close it, move everybody out, everybody repopulates, the idea is to maintain it on a regular basis. But that would come with coordinations from each of the council offices. Like I said, everyone is unique and the needs are unique to each one. Today, you mentioned the fire, coordinating that effort of what districts actually needed to go or what resources needed to go and the other ones needed to continue. I think that was the growing pains in October and November as to how we distribute and how we allocate and who's available, and to shut everything down probably made the most sense, but it happened like right in October when we anticipated it coming, but we kind of mobilized accordingly. So where do you want to see this in the first part of next year? Again, October, November has been a lot of training, a lot of interaction with the homeless community as far as becoming familiar with the faces. You know your mailman, you know your trash man. Well, this community will know, here comes the green trucks, so we got to do this, that, and the other. Where we want to move to in the future is that component of maintaining it on a regular basis. So they will have a schedule. They'll have less comprehensive cleanups because they will be maintained throughout the week and month as it progresses. And then, to add an additional component is to provide that steam cleaning kind of component to the actual sidewalks and areas where we sanitize and deodorize certain areas that are heavily populated on a regular basis. So where we were in October and November was kind of a training and learning curve. Where we are today is a familiarity of, okay, at 6:15 we got to hit this spot, that spot, this spot. Where we will be tomorrow is, okay, you've hit all your routine spots. Now, where did we clean last week? And can we go back and maintain those on a regular basis with the emphasis on bringing other equipment to sanitize and deodorize? And that will eventually, if you leave white sidewalks behind, you'll leave that impression that something was done.
Okay, members, do you have any questions? Mr. Krikorian, why don't you kick us off?
Thank you. I want to make a few observations first, and my observations are a little bit different in my district because I'm very pleased that we've moved forward with the additional staffing, the additional equipment, the additional investment in creating the care teams, and I'm especially pleased at having a significant increase in the resources that are devoted to the San Fernando Valley, which we did not have before. I'm also very pleased that we've redeployed how the teams are sent out so that we have them deployed from the valley now instead of being deployed from downtown, which wasted a half a day just in transportation time back and forth. So in many respects, this program is a significant operational improvement over where we were before, where cleanups in my district rarely happened before, and when they did happen, the areas looked pretty much the same 2 days later as they did before the cleanup. I've noticed a significant difference in many areas of my district because of the CARE program, and also because of the trash receptacle daily pickup, which has made a big difference in a lot of areas. There are encampment areas where there may still be people sleeping on that same sidewalk, the same people that were sleeping there 6 months ago even, and we haven't gotten them housed, and LASA hasn't made the connection with those people to get them the longer term remedies. But I will tell you, the area looks much better because we have trash receptacles that are being used and that are being emptied every day and that aren't overflowing. So I think there's a lot of good things to say about what's happened with CARE, especially after the initial hiccups of the October rollout. Now, that being said, there are a few things that I would want to offer as potential areas of improvement. And one is coordinating the LASA workers' schedules. And specifically, 3 times we've had CARE deployments in my district canceled at essentially the last minute because we were informed that the LASA employees had to be in training and that all LASA employees throughout the system were all in the same training, which to me is ludicrous and a lack of operational leadership by LASA to have trainings that are so comprehensive that they shut down our cleanup process. That to me is ridiculous, and I would like to see us working more with LASA to have rotating trainings or something else so that that doesn't interfere with your operations, because that just should never happen. That's problem number 1 that I've noticed. We also have, and I think this may go to your point, Madam Chair, what we've seen is, although we have a CARE team now devoted to our district, it isn't, at least initially, wasn't necessarily responding to the priorities that my district would have identified. And the reason for that is that at the initial rollout, you were responding mainly to 311 backlog. Now, the 311 backlog is not necessarily going to be a true reflection of what the biggest priorities are for a particular council district, frankly, because some neighborhoods utilize 311 a lot more effectively than others. And Chair has a pilot program to address exactly that problem that we're going to be voting on shortly. I think that's an equity issue that we have to deal with, because in my district, I have areas that are dramatically improved already, that I've seen places that people have been complaining about for months and months, that the problem has essentially been solved because of care. At the same time, I have other areas in my district where care has been essentially never seen. And that's because in those parts of my district, people don't utilize 311 to the same degree. And so I'd like to see a lot more coordination, and I think it's improving, but still we have to have a lot more coordination. The staff in Mr. O'Farrell's district, Ms. Martinez, all of our districts know their district. You know, they know every square foot of the district. They know the people who have been chronically homeless for years. They know the homeless population that is problematic and the ones that are quiet and keep to themselves. They know all that. And so in the interests of having the continuity of service that CARE is designed to provide, I would just, in the strongest possible terms, urge you to utilize the prioritization that the district office staffs have, because they know their districts. They know our districts. And so to have that responsiveness to the district office requests is just, you know, as critically important as it can be. And then one other point, and then maybe I'll come back after my colleagues have spoken, but we had a process initially, as I understand it, where in the interests of outreach, we had made we were required to be making multiple contacts before any action was being taken with regard to cleanup. And as a result, I get the reason for that in terms of outreach and the value of outreach, but at the same time, when we are seeing violations of our law when it comes to bulky items or sanitation issues, I don't see a compelling reason to wait to have 5 visits before we initiate action. So this has been an issue that's been bounced around by UHRC multiple times with the Bureau. It's just, I think, imperative that, yes, LASA should still be out there making multiple contacts and trying to get folks housed. But in the meantime, on visit number 1, we need to be doing what's necessary to ensure compliance with the law. And the fact that we haven't done enough outreach does not give anyone, whether they're housed or unhoused, the right to violate the law and to make our neighborhoods less sanitary and less and to not protect public safety and public health. So if there's an unwritten rule or something within the Bureau to continue to make multiple contacts before enforcement action begins, we've just got to get that unwritten rule out of this process so that the law is enforced from minute 1, in my view. I don't know if my colleagues feel differently about it, but
I would agree with you. Mr. O'Farrell?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So LASA should continue the outreach and getting it to know the clients, but they should not, absolutely should not be making any decisions on our behalf. Had I known with CARE and CARE Plus that decision-making would be centralized when it first rolled out, I would have protested then. Let me tell you what happened in the 13th District. I start getting calls from constituents in some of our chronic homeless encampment areas because they were proliferating rapidly out of control after years of my office's direct involvement for keeping things somewhat under control. And we learned that someone either from LASA, who was now in the mayor's office, I'm not sure what that connection was brought aboard and then actually scheduling out where the care teams were going, bypassing our office entirely. So you had someone new who didn't know the 13th District in any way, shape, or form, deciding where the crews would go after whatever outreach had been attained, and completely bypassing my entire team that has mostly been in place for 6.5 years. And we do know every square foot of the district. We know where our hotspot areas are. We know the individuals who live in the encampments by name, and we've interacted with them for years. And all of a sudden, that power was taken away entirely, and we had several areas that just turned into a disaster. Now, it's my understanding that there's been a shift, and I have to give Mr. Garcia a lot of props for this because he has been working directly with my office for years. And now I understand that we do have the authority now to prioritize on where the attention goes. Without that, I'm not ever going to support this program. We have a mission to keep our neighborhoods clean, safe, and get people into housing. I am not sure that LASA has that same mission. It's very unclear to me. We work with LASA, we work quite well with them, but if the decision-making is starting to be taken away from the electeds and being made by folks who aren't accountable to anyone, including us, and yet our constituents are the ones who are suffering, that's a real problem in the structure of this process. Having said all that, I understand from my district director that it has gotten better in recent weeks. I just want to make sure that we have a complete reboot in who you listen to, and it's got to be us. We have to lead in the prioritizing of these jobs because we know where they are. I could give you a short list right now off the top of my head, and I'll spare you that. But it's frustrating because we have additional resources as never before, all good. You gentlemen and your teams have thought of an incredibly wonderful process with targeted local hire, training, etc. It's all really great, but none of it will work if we're taken out of the decision-making process, but yet we have all the responsibility and none of the decision-making. I want to hear that we have all the decision-making, not just some of it, once a month or something. So I want to keep pressing that because the worst thing you could do is take away the knowledge base on an initiative that is so important. And so I just wanted to put that out there. One thing that I witnessed as well is after one of the care projects, there was just a whole load of garbage, trash, some bulky items on one side of the street. And the residents of the encampment had gone back, but they left all of the bulky item and trash. And I was told that that couldn't be picked up because it was their belongings, but yet it was just sitting there unattended to. Now causing problems on both sides of the street and blocking sidewalks on both sides of the street as opposed to just one. So to the chair's comment about leaving more trash more visible, I've seen that too. I think it's an issue. Got to be dealt with. It has to be dealt with. And in terms of the trash receptacles, I think there was a rollout of the wire baskets. Worthless. You all know that's worthless, right? They get torn up, trash falls through them, they get crushed, stomped on. You got to get rid of the wire baskets. It's got to be industrial strength, really hard to destroy trash receptacles. Otherwise, the wire baskets just become yet another ruined, bulky item to be picked up and taken to the dump. And yes, I have other questions in relation to RVs and the services, et cetera, but I'm happy to wait so I don't hog all the time here.
Mr. Correct?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we've sort of gotten to the crux of my complaint about the program. And my staff has sort of hinted to me that we have roughly the same problem as Martinez has, which is it's not really getting anything any better, and in some cases it's making it worse. And as they've described it simply, the CARE program goes to a location, they say, we'd like to remove your trash. Sorry, no, we don't want you to. Okay, bye. So that's why it doesn't get any better, because it's voluntary. On the other hand, the CARE Plus system, because we do so much outreach in advance, is slow and inefficient. So if we had more of a CARE Half Plus program where we didn't require any advanced outreach, we gave the 72 hours notice and then we came in and cleaned it up, I think that would be perfect, because it removes the voluntary element, it removes the extendedly long bureaucratic period before you can clean up, and it gets the sanitation job done. And I think for us, until we get the sanitation piece humming and done perfectly, I don't know that we're as concerned about the outreach element. Of course we want it, but if it interferes with our primary mission, which right now is to create a strong sanitation program, I think it has to take somewhat of a back seat. So I'm wondering if, my staff has asked, can we get rid of the CARE program in our district and just go back to CARE Plus? And I would say if we can go back to CARE Plus minus 5 times visiting of outreach before you clean up a site, I think that would be great. Probably the optimum would be to do 72-hour notice cleanups like a CARE Plus without the outreach, and then back it up with a CARE program where you just came along and consistently removed some of the excess that is accessible to you. But right now I know, especially in the Pico-Robertson area and area around that in my district, we're getting a lot of complaints, including from staff, that things are just getting worse. So that would be my proposal for a next step approach, and let the outreach be done separately, but not hold up the rest of the sanitation process.
All right, I do have some additional instructions when it comes to this item, but Mr. O'Farrell, I'm going to give you another opportunity to go ahead and answer your questions before I do that.
Thank you so much. One of the really good new programs is dealing with RVs and folks who are living in vehicles and servicing them. And so how has that gone in terms of reducing waste that is discarded haphazardly from RVs especially, and sometimes vehicles, hazardous waste? And have the disposal stations been working? Have the folks who live in vehicles made use of the disposal stations?
Howard Wong, LA Sanitation Chief Environmental Compliance Inspector. Regarding RVs, sir, we do have 2 additional dumping sites open, one in the Reseda Yard area and one in the Glassell Park area. Within the Reseda area, there was about approximately 26 individuals who utilized the dumping. Excuse me, that was the Glassell Park area. The Reseda Yard was just recently open, and we had 2 individuals who came by and provided their free dumping service that they took up upon. We do have crews going out within a 1-mile radius of each of the locations to conduct outreach locations for these individuals who are living in their RVs to provide free dumping services. In the event that they choose not to do that, there is, within watershed protection under LA Sanitation, there is a 24-hour number that we can respond to if there are any type of what we call illicit discharges of sewage and or gray water out into the public right away. And we'll respond to that immediately within the Bureau of Sanitation.
So that's good that you have 2 in the city, but just a 1-mile radius in terms of like folks knowing that where they can go. That excludes 98% of the folks living in RVs in the city.
That's correct. We're looking to additional locations. There are 2 other locations that were open years past. One's at the Hyperion Treatment Plant, and the other is in the sanitation yard out of the Gaffey Solids Waste Yard. So there's 4 total within the city of Los Angeles that have this utilize free dumping.
And is that expected to expand? The current program, is it expected to expand beyond the 2 sites?
Depending upon facility resources and available spots where we can get access to the sewer line and make it.
Okay. There are maps in your report that show where schools and libraries are in close proximity to areas that see a high frequency of illegal dumping. How will this data directly inform care team deployment?
I was writing when you said that. Can you repeat that?
Sure. The maps in your report show where schools and libraries are in close proximity to areas that experience a high frequency of illegal dumping. So how will the data that you collect inform the care team deployment?
Again,
these sensitive areas.
This touches on number 6 when it comes to all the digital and real-time communication between the care plus the care teams, the UHRC, the council offices. And thank you very much. I do work very closely. I've used 13 as a model for some of my crazy ideas, but it has worked where we've deployed signage to data-driven locations based on the type of items being discarded. So in CD 6 and 7, I believe, and down in the harbor area, there's a lot of commercial, industrial, heavy type. And in your area, Mr. Councilman Krikorian's area, there's a lot of apartments. And CD5, there's a lot of apartments also, CD1. So we deployed a model of signage depicting the type earlier this year, and we took certain areas, and we're going to look back next year, once a year cycle has gone by, to see if the volume of calls, if the actual signage has proved to be effective. I don't know if you've seen the signage, but just, I'm sorry, real quick.
Okay.
This is more of the commercial. The only thing that's missing, the ones that went out have the actual phone number, giving them direction.
And are those temporary, but they last a long time signs?
They're metal.
They're metal signs.
Permanent.
Can the council office have access to some of those? We can help post them.
So again, we did deploy, I believe, 20 in your district, 40 in both CD 6 and 2, based on the clean stat data that we received. So this is more of a commercial type area, and then these 2 were placed back to back in Spanish and English, where there's a lot of unreported furniture, common household furniture, electronics, that kind of stuff. So we're evaluating the data and placing this permanent signage up to see if the volume of calls to our service center have increased. So if they have, it's a good thing. If we need to populate more, we'll see in the next few quarters of clean stat data.
Okay. Thank you. So you heard my lament earlier. To what degree are you now involving the council offices in where to deploy the care teams?
No, absolutely. So our community service group, which is liaison with the council offices, have been in direct contact with each one of your districts, and that component is vital. And it's vital to what you mentioned as it relates to service requests and areas where service requests are not generated. And the field deputies within the districts that know the area and know the need are directly coordinating with our community services group on priorities to ensure that these priorities are addressed. So that component is there now.
It's there. So this community service group, do they have veto power over a council office?
No, they're going to work directly with your council office to receive the priority locations and make sure that those are scheduled.
Because we've all experienced all of a sudden, everyone's geared up for a care day and it just doesn't happen. Because someone else makes that decision and not us.
Right.
No. We want to make sure that doesn't happen again.
Right, and that will not happen with our community service group.
Thank you. And then lastly, Madam Chair, staffing. Do you all feel very good about your ability to staff up, working with personnel, et cetera? And are there any hiccups there?
No, the staffing has went well. As Domingo mentioned, we have been utilizing targeted local hire for some of our entry-level positions, and it's worked great.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
And if I can, just to touch on the RVs, one thing I do want to mention is we are starting a pilot in the Valley, actually in Council District 2, We've been in meetings over the past couple of weeks on the mobile service. So I'm providing that service on a mobile basis, and that's something that we're moving towards now.
Thank you. And just to kind of to your question about, I'm sorry, Councilman Krikorian, regarding the LASA component of it, the familiarity of the care team, because if you want to call it the sports car of this program, will have that familiarity. So with or without LASA, the same laborer, the same driver, the same ECI that approaches that site will have the same, it doesn't necessarily have to be driven, or we won't necessarily cancel due to LASA being absent from the scene. So that familiarity is kind of where we're building towards. Chief Wong will probably attest that probably 80% of your staff is brand new. And so we have to build that training, that confidence level, that understanding that their public health is ultimately our responsibility, and we take control of that particular, regardless if LASA is there or LAPD is there or not, it's our responsibility. To my component of adding pressure washers to all of the care components, so they'll be approaching with a trash truck and with a stake bed that has a power wash unit to it. And then eventually over time, people will pick up their stuff and move because we know we're going to come and wash it down, deodorize it, sanitize it, and leave a white sidewalk behind. So that's kind of like the next phase. We're waiting for this equipment to come in and to outfit our teams out there, especially our little sports cars team, to go out there and be able to be that agile. The coordination, Councilman O'Farrell, that coordination between the priorities of the council office will have to be balanced by the council office as to where we've been yesterday. Is yesterday's cleanups standard that we're going to revisit them to make sure that they stay that way, or will today 5 other locations trump these? And that coordination will happen, understanding that if you neglect this enough, it will start to build up.
But only the council offices have the expertise to engage in that coordination effectively. No one else does.
Absolutely. So the idea here is that you will have a menu of service requests, you'll have a menu of your priorities, and you'll have a menu of visited sites that that somehow will commingle somehow and create a list that we will function by and create the best aesthetics that we can out there in the field. I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I may, just in addition to that, to address the health hazard, so I know it was touched upon as it relates to our role. So LA Sanitation is the lead agency at the regulation of private property on the public right-of-way. Our Chief Environmental Compliance Inspector here over Livability Services Division, who oversees all the environmental compliance inspectors, can touch on that. But what I can say is that we are the lead on that, and we make those determinations, and he can kind of address the protocols and the operation in the field.
Yes, as far as being the lead with the environmental compliance inspectors, there is no other division or other agency that makes that determination regarding health hazards. As you all know, that health hazards can be anything from a hazardous material, a hazardous waste, 30 items on the public right-of-way, needles, syringes, things of that nature, sewage from RV discharges. The environmental compliance inspectors will make that ultimate decision and will respond to that accordingly and remediate the problem.
All right, thank you, Mr. O'Farrell. I think you made some excellent points. I could not agree with you more. Mr. Koretz, you had some final questions?
Yeah, just to follow up on the RV issue. Obviously, we're trying to deal with the health hazard of dumping sewage in various areas. I think unlike homelessness itself, where we say, well, we have to at least make a dent. So if we solve 3% of the homeless problem with one action, it's better than not solving it at all. With sewage, I'm not sure it's the same case if you remove 1% of the sewage by establishing a few of these locations. You still have a major health hazard for the county, and it hasn't gone away. And I don't know that improving it by 1% is even hardly worth the effort. The question is there a better way, even if it's costly and more difficult? Could we establish a mobile collection system where we had some large tank trucks, and we actually visited some of these RVs. Some of them are barely even mobile. So by creating a location that's 10 miles away from the next closest one, we're not really helping that situation. But if we looked at actually some sort of a regular, and I don't know how often you have to pick these up, whether it's weekly or monthly before they fill up, if we had some sort of a regular visit and just went around and created a loop of RV locations and actually removed them, I think you would dramatically impact the health issue. You might even impact the issue of people constantly trying to get them out of their neighborhoods. Because while they don't look lovely, I think the most compelling reason to get them out is that people are dumping sewage in front of their homes, which is clearly a health hazard. So have we looked at that? Can we look at it? Is it an expense that, other than the equipment, that we can handle?
Right. No, and that's to the point of the mobile unit for the RVs that we're incorporating now. So we have what's called a mini Vector truck, which can handle that component on a mobile basis. So in addition to the 4 sites that we have, that's the mobile component that we're in the process of building on now.
And how likely are we to reach a point where we actually can service most of the RVs that are out there on the streets of Los Angeles?
Right, and I think utilizing some of the data that we have as it relates to where the RVs are. So part of the enhancement for CleanStat was to incorporate our assessors to determine where these RVs are located so we can better assist with this particular part of the program. So as this program progresses, I think we can look at it and make that determination on, best practices as it relates to the mobile component.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koretz. Any other questions? Seeing none, so I just really want to recognize that there's that many of our crews are working really hard on a daily basis. I can 100% would say that. And while I appreciate them all and their hard work, something isn't working. So I just want to emphasize the sense of urgency, because I hear what you're saying. It feels like you're saying that we need to rely on things will get better. But in my community, things were getting better when we had hope a couple of months ago. We rolled that program out almost 3.5 years ago, and we piloted it in my district, and it was working. So now we have another program that was supposed to expedite more crews, get things cleaner faster, and make sure that we're keeping up with the amount of trash. And now I feel like we're going backwards. In fact, I think it's getting worse in a lot of the cases. So I cannot explain to my constituents that your data that shows that this program is a success, while the reality on the streets tell a very different story. Because all I need to do is drive around and see the mountains of trash. That's not acceptable. So I want to go ahead and, rather than filing the report on item number 4, I want to instruct you to return back to this committee in January, and I want you to report on the following things. An action plan on how we will see visible improvements of cleanliness in our streets. 2, an accounting of funds spent to date on these efforts. And 3, justification of why we should continue this program. Any objections, members?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Koretz.
I'd like to also ask that the department come back with any programmatic redesigns that are taking place between now and the time of coming back with that report.
Very well. Any other, anything else?
No, I think that sums it up.
All right, thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and expect you to come back next month. I also want to move and adopt motions in items number 4, 6, and 7. Without objection, that will be the order.
Madam Chair, you mean 5, 6, and 7?
I'm sorry, 5, 6, and 7, because I kept 4 here. Thank you for catching that. Without objections, that will be the order. That concludes items on this agenda. Our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.